Good afternoon, Marietta. It's our spring break day here on Marietta College campus. You're listening to WCMO FM 98.5. I'm Cole Longcor, and here today we have a special exclusive interview for the release of Jardine's new single. And with me today we have Larry Dvoskin here on Zoom, virtual studio hour here on WCMO. So, Larry, can you introduce yourself a little bit for everyone out there in the audience?
Sure. Well, hello to everybody today in Ohio and beyond. It's great to be here. My name is Larry. I'm a musician, a songwriter, and producer, and I have worked with Jardine, who is one of the co-founding members of the Beach Boys, for a couple of decades now, and have been his co-writer. I've also worked over the years with a variety of people. Sammy Hagar, who's a singer who also was in Van Halen, Bad Company. I've worked with Joan Jett. I've worked with Robin Zander of Cheap Trick. One of my bands, Zeno, toured with Queen. So I have a lot of, real legendary rock background, and a sort of one person recently called me the Forrest Gump of rock and roll because I just seem to have touched points, all these different touch points along the way. So I'm very happy to be here and be with you, Cole, today, and having like some juicy backstage stories of rock and roll, and certainly talking about Al Jardine.
Great. So, just kind of playing off of that, I really want to know, like, so many people typically when they get into music, it's like a really young age, and there's always like that one band that influences them. So, just what drew you into kind of the music industry, and like who were your influences?
Great question. Without a doubt, the Beatles, and we were talking about that as a favorite. I mean, you can get different but not better, from singing to originality to songwriting. Kids came into my class when I was in sixth grade, and they played like Hey Jude, and it's sort of like every girl like swooned at these two guys singing, and every boy wanted to say, I should play guitar and sing, like that looks cool. So I literally on my way home, I it was one of those sort of epiphany moments. I literally heard a voice in my head saying, if this is what you want to do, you will do it and you will be successful. Like a knowing that was not just a wishfulness, but a knowing. I didn't know how or where or with whom, but it was like there's a movie, Field of Dreams, with Kevin Costner, and he hears this voice like, build it and they will come. It was one of those things. And so, literally, by the time I was in freshman in high school, I was playing in a band for my whole class, like the freshman class reception, all the stuff. And by the time I was in college, I was quitting college to go on tour with the first band, Fandango, opening for the Allman Brothers, Tom Petty, you know, all of those great bands of that era of the late 70s, early 80s. And I was just immediately into rock and roll.
Great. So, very much like sing it and they will come situation.
Yeah,
Quite
exactly.
literally a calling.
Yeah, it was really a calling, and it happened fast. It's different nowadays. Nowadays you can, you and I could go blah 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 and upload it to like a digital service provider that puts it on Spotify and Apple and Tidal, and we're online in a minute, but there's 60,000 songs a day going up on Spotify. Back then there was a lot less music coming out, and so there was a feeling of more of a nurturing. If you did get to a band that got a record deal, you could spend two, three, four, five albums on a record label without having a hit, but the record company would be developing you
Mm-hmm.
to and grooming you to have success. And now that's gone. It's like, if you're not a TikTok sensation in 5 seconds, it's like next, next. So there's a good and a bad in the difference of today and yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But I was lucky to just get in and tour with all these great artists and perform. And
Yeah. So, what was it like being like a college age kid? Going on tour with like Tom Petty and stuff.
it was a little bit of a pinch me fantasy because you have these things that happen where, it's sort of like if you were watching a film, you were in the movie theater, and then the actors came off the screen into the audience and sat down next to you and like reached into your popcorn. I found myself once in the same period of time befriending Crosby, Stills, and Nash, or Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. And I'd, grown up like a kid in high school, driving around like smoking a joint and listening to these songs. And suddenly, like 2 years later, I'm at the Garden and I'm in a dressing room and I see like Crosby yelling at Stills and saying, "It's the encore and I'm going to do two songs and you should only do one." And the other guy saying, "Well, I'm not going out unless I do two songs." And standing there and thinking, this is crazy. These are my idols, my heroes, and they're like arguing over how many songs they do in an encore, and then they all go out on stage, and there's 18,000 people at Madison Square Garden cheering, and they're all smiling and arm in arm, and I'm thinking, wow, they were just about to kill each other about 30 seconds ago. So it's a surreal experience. It's definitely a wonderful experience. Doesn't change you, doesn't make you a better person, doesn't make you superior to your friends, but it just gives you insight into the fact that if you have a dream and you really don't give up on your dream, that anything is possible.
Awesome. So, just kind of how did you get from where you were there to where you are now? I mean, you started off as a college kid doing opening acts and stuff. How do you get to being in the industry for so long and as a writer and a producer now?
Medication. I'm sorry, just this is a college station, so we can't be too politically correct. No, kidding around. I just have had a passion for music. I have a passion to do things creatively, and I think that pivoting, what people talk about, there's a lot of things in life right now where we're talking about business and tech. Everything is about tech, blockchain, virtual reality, NFTs, all this blah, blah, blah. And I think that musicians, if you're able to pivot, if you're able to go with the times and the changing abilities of things, then you stay current, your brain stays engaged. So I've been always learning, always growing. So, I played in those bands, and then I moved to Europe, and then I was in a band called Zeno in Europe, and I found myself touring opening for Black Sabbath on a whole English tour in I think 85 or 86, and then Queen on their very last tour. But then when I came home and, let's say, wasn't in a band, wasn't making a living, there's nothing worse than thinking you're a famous rock star and then not getting a job as a waiter in a restaurant in Woodstock because you have zero waiter experience on your resume. So I think it's also being willing to endure the failures because you have a passion to create and make people happy. So I literally worked after touring with Queen in soccer stadiums in a Mexican restaurant in Woodstock, New York. And I'm the worst waiter ever because I'm rebellious, and I was like, I'm not going to behave, so I wear crazy costumes and do crazy songs like Nacho Man, and when I'm serving nachos to the audience, nacho, and the staff hated me. But anyway, the pivoting is a thing. So going from being a musician, and then I found myself really needing to figure out, what do I do? And I'm saying this to all the students who might tune into this and other people. What do you do that people need? Not what you want, but what do people need? I mean, it's a very basic thing, So I realized and was told all along, my songs are great. Maybe I'm not the best solo artist. I'm not Bruce Springsteen or Billy Joel, but people love my songs. So then I became a songwriter for other groups. And then after a while, the recordings of my songs, people said, this sounds so good. Can we just have you as the producer of this demo and just polish it up a bit? So it's been a long and winding road of pivoting to come to this place where I am now, and I'm in just like there's a full moon and a new moon and a high tide and a low tide. I've gone through very low periods where any sane person would have gone back to school and worked for a hedge fund and said, I want to make some money, and instead I've been just really passionate about the music, and now I'm in a renaissance, like it's a high tide coming up again,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm very grateful for, Cole. It's if you're looking for job security, you know, even that, it's not what it used to be. In any occupation, people used to have, retirement plans, and we don't know what the future holds. So I always say to people, just, if this was your last day on earth, would you be happy sitting in a cubicle, or would you be happy playing guitar and learning, the chords to your favorite song? You know.
Mm-hmm. No, so I mean that's kind of an amazing story, and I mean I love that throughout all of this. I can pick up just how much you love music based on like your word choice. I'm getting like Full Moon, Long and Winding Road, like you're just.
Yeah.
It must be like subconscious at this point, but there's just like all these little lyrical tidbits throughout your speech. So,
It gets worse because,
yeah.
especially working with one of the founders of the Beach Boys, they have so many hits that it's easy to write an entire email just using titles of their songs. So I would be like, "Dear editor of the Big Time magazine, wouldn't it be nice, God only knows, if you did an interview with Jardine of the Beach Boys? It would be fun, 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 and really good vibrations for your readers. Signed, Larry."
Yeah.
There are certain bands, I'm sure the Beatles, it's the same way, So that's really true.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
talk in lyrics sometimes.
No, and I mean, you're so right about the Renaissance currently going on. I mean, like, we have bands like the Beach Boys and the Who and F1 doing anniversary tours, getting back together now. We're seeing a resurgence in vinyl, which personally I think is awesome. I mean, I'm that one college kid that still refuses to let go and has a turntable, so. And I mean, like, even Tower Records is back now. I mean, granted, it's an online service. They don't have storefronts in the U.S. anymore, but they're back. I mean, there was a time when they were fully dead, so. It's beautiful to see that the passion survives.
You know, Everything is a cycle. The biggest social media tech sensation, Clubhouse right now is the hottest thing,
Hmm.
is what I want to say. And it's just a voice. After all of our stuff of like wear an Oculus and you'll go into a virtual world with aliens from Japan or something, people are just talking on their phone and listening to other people talk. And that's like the hottest thing in Silicon Valley. And it's expanded so much that it's their servers buckle very often, like on a Saturday night, because so many people are trying to sign on. And at the same time, um, things are cyclical. In the 80s, people went to these drum machines. Everything was a drum machine. And, you heard like Phil Collins and all these people with these big sounding drum machines. Then Kurt Cobain came along and stuck his middle finger out and said, "No, we're going to friggin' rock here, and I'm gonna have Dave Grohl like pound the drums, and live drums were back." So you're absolutely right. Like vinyl is the biggest selling physical product in music. It's growing
Hmm.
exponentially, and and what's delightful is also some of the iconic bands, like you mentioned, like the Who. They grow into legendary status
Hmm.
where instead of being like, oh, a band that had hits and doesn't have hits, they become something else. They become a part of someone's childhood. So people growing up now, whether it's Drake or whether it's Dua Lipa or Bad Bunny or Dead Mouse or Greta Van Fleet, the bands of today will be part of someone's childhood in 15 or 20 years from now, saying, "Man, that time I went to that Greta Van Fleet concert. I saw James Bay and he came out with a little, Gibson guitar and played that song." These are the things that create the foundation of this artistic thing, and that's a beautiful thing. And every generation has its heroes.
Hmm.
So I've tried to not be one of those guys who's like, "Yeah, it used to be really good in the old days," and I'm like, "What old days? Like Bach, like Chopin? Like it was really good back then, and those guys probably had their teeth fell out by the time they were 14." So I don't know. It's a crazy thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, like, You're definitely right, and I mean it really does oscillate and pivot, kind of based on just current trends and everything. But I mean, there's so much to be said of just the influence of it all. I mean, like one of your main influence was listening to the Beatles in sixth grade.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like my earliest memory is driving on a country road listening to the Beatles one album
Mm.
with my
Yeah.
dad, and I mean, like
Well, that's a
here
great
we are,
album.
both in the same studio, doing this interview, both having the Beatles as our influence, and the only difference is like it happened like 50 years apart.
Yeah, and that's the sign also of great music because that record one was the biggest selling album of the year. And it was the biggest selling album of the year it came out that was for a band that broke up 50 years earlier.
Hmm.
So that's saying something. And good music really lasts. And I have to just share a story about the pandemic, which is with the shutdown, with everyone sheltering in place and things closed, restaurants, other things closing. I had a kind of a reckoning. I moved out of New York City. I moved to a little country town north of the city, and I had to think, well, if people aren't coming over to my studio to record, what can I do? And I had all of these things on my computer that have been just sitting like in folders and laptops. So I released a book in May of 2020 called Do What You Love Songwriting. And it was my songwriting textbook when I teach at New York University. And the kids for years said, you should have a textbook. Like you talk about life, not just songs and melodies and chords.
Hmm.
You talk about the philosophy of being an artist. And so the book I tied to a charity, and the charity is called World Central Kitchen. WCF.org, and they're feeding the doctors and nurses and essential workers who are helping people with COVID 19 and their families. They went to California last summer during the fires. They're in Texas right now with all the people whose pipes froze and they can't get water. So they're literally doing like God's work, like feeding people on the ground for free daily. And so my book came out that was years old that I never released, and it debuted at number one on two different charts on Amazon Books, like the songwriting and lyrics charts. And that was from years ago. So I was like, oh my God, suddenly, like, you have this thing you can make people jealous of on Instagram.
Hmm.
Here is my big thing, blah, blah, blah. Look at me. And then I had a song that came out in October, I should say, of 2020 called Life is Strange from my solo album from 2010, and we did this crazy video because 2020 was so crazy with the election and the politics and global warming and COVID that I thought, the chorus of Life is Strange, the line is, I feel like I'm living in a Salvador Dali painting. Like it's surreal. Like real life is stranger than weird science fiction. So I put that out and it suddenly started climbing the charts. I think it just resonated with people so much that I'd pick up these radio reports like Media Base and New Music Weekly, and it would be like next to Bad Bunny or it'd be next to Billie Eilish. And I'd be like, I'm this old guy who works with like the Beach Boys. Like, how am I next to these sort of people who are all under 25? But it just shows you that good music, back to Circle to the Beatles and you being into the record number one, Beatles number ones, and me sort of having a sixth grade experience with Hey Jude. Great music just doesn't age. We age, but music stays,
Hmm.
on a vibrational frequency and it touches people. So what I'm finding now is with all of this that I'm really able to, in the harvest kind of way, how people plant seeds and they water and nurture them, and then at the end it's time to harvest. I'm in a sort of harvest period right now where I'm able to take things that have been around for a while and just put them out, and they're being enjoyed now more than they were ever enjoyed in the past.
Hmm. So going off of that, how about we get into the new single you've been working on with Al?
Yes. The new single that's started in 1993. In Beach Boys time, it's a little like geographic time, like when geologists look at the earth and say, well, this fossil's from 200 million years ago. I don't want to call them that old, but we started this group. There were two songs on a CD single, and Al Jardine decided that there isn't, there hasn't been any new music in a while. With the shutdown, everyone sort of stayed home. It's their 60th anniversary this year, 2021, of the Beach Boys. So there are things planned for the summer, and it's coming together based on who knows, if things open up more,
Hmm.
etc. So there's nothing confirmed, but there's talks. And Al just said, so many people are hurting. There's so much suffering in the world and insecurity that, like, let's put some happy music out there. So there are two songs. One is called Waves of Love, and we've labeled it Waves of Love 2.0 because there was a different version that is completely different in a different key, that was a bonus track that he did about 9 years ago, as a bonus track on his album. And then another song called Jenny Clover. And they're both kind of really happy-go-lucky songs. So that's the thing. We wanted to just give people a little feel-good thing and tie in a little bit of that World Central Kitchen that I was mentioning, that we're going to give some of the proceeds to them because they've served 35 million free meals in America alone in less than 12 months, to anyone who people lost their job, to their employing restaurants. So we wanted to do something that makes people feel good and that does good.
Hmm.
And so that's why we've put this CD out in February for Valentine's Day. And the CD, by the way, is oversold. Like, I actually didn't expect it. It's a kind of a tsunami because Beach Boys fans are super fans, and
Yeah.
they gobble up anything new. So it's really cool, and I get to sort of pay homage to a legend. To the Beach Boys are called America's band,
Hmm.
and they're really, when you go to a concert and the lights go out and everyone starts cheering, the announcer says, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome America's band. Because they've symbolized. Some bands are very left wing, some bands are right wing. The Beach Boys are no wing, or both wings. They just represent something about our hopefulness as a nation, and that's and the very best of what America represents to the rest of the world.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, they're not really the wings. They're more of like the lift that builds it all up, and we're just flying on,
Yeah.
just kind of gliding on, hopefulness. So, what's it like working with Al and producing this single?
Really good. The thing is, and I've done some interviews with him where he talks about his approach to being creative is really as a collaborator. There are lots of people who work alone. Pete Townsend of The Who writes the music and then presents it to the band, and Roger sings it, and whoever's in the band now will play the bass and drums. But Al is a co-writer. So I would, it reminded me of stories I heard about Lennon and McCartney, where in the very early days they'd be like eyeball to eyeball with guitars, and one guy would sing, you think you lost your love, and then the other guy would sing, well, I saw her yesterday, and then the other guy would say, it's you she's thinking of, and then the other guy would say, I told you what to say. And so with Al, it's a little bit of that, of this back and forth, where I went to his barn and his ranch in California on the coast, this beautiful place, right out of Lord of the Rings, beautiful trees and mountains and ocean and very beautiful landscape. And we wrote these songs and then started recording them. And at the time, Carl Wilson was still alive. So during one of the shows, after the show, they had like some recording equipment, and we got Carl Wilson to sing on the chorus. And for those of you who don't know, he's that really angelic voice of the Beatles that sings Good Vibrations and God Only Knows, that very like pure toned
Hmm.
voice. So I had a blast. And then over the years, we've had different times. Al has come to my apartment to sing. There was a time in 2010 when he just wanted to come to New York City and be in the Village, and like he checked out of his hotel and moved into my apartment, and he was sleeping on the couch, and I remember talking to another radio DJ or a journalist, and he's like, what's happening to you today?" And I'm like, "Well, I have one of the Beach Boys couch surfing." And he's like, "No," like he was like, "Take a picture. I don't believe you." It was one of those things she should be in like the Four Seasons or the Ritz Carlton. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
no, he's a road dog. He's a road warrior. He's used to sleeping in a van or a car, when he was growing up. So it's a wonderful thing, unpretentious, really talented, um, and also a loyal friend. The best things in life are if you can make friends with somebody who you work with and it's not just transactional. I mean, my mom passed away, and Al and his wife Marianne, they just had come to the ranch, get out of the East Coast, just chill, get to nature, go on the beach, have a moment. Like they're that kind of friends, and those come along very rarely in life, and you want to honor and recognize how special that is.
Hmm. So we're coming up on our half hour here. We'll get to the single in just a couple minutes.
Sure.
But any kind of closing thoughts or anything you want to say out there to all the students listening?
Several things. To the students that are listening, I want to say that, you know, the if you don't ask, the answer is no. And people never, the greatest tragedy, some great philosopher said the greatest tragedy in life is not to try and fail, but to die with the music inside you. And you all listening have the ability now to reach the world through the internet and whatever platform, whatever technology, in a way that didn't exist before. You can build an app, you can build a platform, you can write a song and put it up on Instagram or SoundCloud or somewhere. So, you know, I just think that it is an extraordinary time to be innovative and to try and fail. There's a friend of mine who's a billionaire VC and has started 10 companies that we work with in our daily lives now. And one of his mottos of his school that and the people that he teaches is that you try and fail and try and fail and try and fail and try again. So I think that in my case, I've had many times after going to the heights that you can go to, looking out on a stage, before Queen and U2 and In Excess as the opening act and seeing a sea of people and thinking, wow, like I've really made it. Like this is the rock star dream. And then also having no money and like living in an apartment and feeling like, oh gosh, the rent is due soon. And, I can't even get a job at Starbucks because I have no barista qualifications. So the willingness to go through the challenges and the failures to continue to live your dream is what makes a life really rich and fulfilling. And so, a lot of people are afraid. They want a backup plan. Like I'll go get a law degree and then I'll try to be a photographer or a painter or a model or an actor or something. And I always deliberately I pulled the rug out from under my own feet. I said, if I have a backup plan, I'm going to fall backwards. I'm going to reach one of those points where things aren't happening, and I'm going to go to work in a cubicle, under a fluorescent lamp with an, angry boss, and be drained by the time I get home. And I know I'm giving you a cliche, and we're not doing that during the lockdown now, but that lifestyle, I knew that it would eat me up. So I've always been more adventurous, and with great risk comes great reward.
Hmm. Yeah, you can't take the leap if the safety net's still below. So
Yeah, exactly. And I'm also told you're a big Who fan. Is that correct? Are you a Who
yeah,
fan, or is it? Yeah.
no, definitely. So yeah, I mean, as far as I can remember back, I remember listening to the Who. And then while I was younger, I was able to actually see our community theater put on Tommy live. So I went and I saw the play version of that and was just memorized. And then next thing you know, I have like every Who album on vinyl. I saw them for their 50th anniversary tour a few years back. So yeah.
Mhm. Well, I'm a Who fan as well. Like when I was in high school, I went to see them, and Madison Square Garden in New York is like the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz. It's the place,
Hmm.
and it was the last tour with Keith Moon, and they come out and it's dark, and you just hear that beginning of Teenage Wasteland,
Yeah.
that those the keyboard, and then the piano and the guitar goes boom, 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 and it's like
Hmm.
wow, and so years later, a friend of mine named Gerard McMahon started producing Roger, because he has his own solo things that are different and separate than Pete Townsend,
Hmm.
and Pete really is the writer of the music, so Roger needs other influences. And I got to meet again one of my heroes, and met Roger, who's a very down to earth, nice guy.
Hmm.
But it struck me that there are certain stars, and then there are certain superstars,
Yeah.
and they're different. And we went to see, I think it was Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, like some kind of really hard rock
Hmm.
band at a club in New York. And we were in the club, and we were in a booth in the back, and I'm sitting talking to Roger at the time, and I think Chris Stamp, who was the producer. And several things happened. Like Chris Stamp told me that before Tommy, bands just put out records, and they put out pop singles like I Can See for Miles or Magic Bus, and the record company would like promote the single. But
Hmm.
when Tommy came along, and then later Quadrophenia, that was a type of music that had never existed before, like a rock opera.
Yeah.
So they couldn't just throw it up the charts and pay like gangsters to pay radio stations or whatever they used to do. They had to create an entirely new audience.
Hmm.
So they literally had to go out and find an audience that likes storytelling but also rock and roll. So the Who played in opera houses and things. They played at the Metropolitan Opera in New
Hmm.
York instead of Madison Square Garden for Tommy. So it was a really interesting time. And the audience was supposed to be watching the band, but at least half the audience was actually turned around with their back to the band and just staring at our table, staring at Roger Daltrey with their mouth open, like, oh my God, that guy, he's here,
Hmm.
and women were coming up like it was like a receiving line at a book signing, just saying, I fell in love with you when I was a kid, or blah blah blah. And Roger was just very kind. He was like, look, thank you. And so it taught me that, rock stars aren't all self absorbed, snotty people. They can actually be cool.
Hmm.
And especially the people who have survived and lived long enough, they can get to be cool. So
Yeah.
I don't want to talk too long, but I wanted to give you like a little, story about him, and a story about the second song, Waves of Love by Al Jardine, that we're going to play, and you mentioned in a minute. The second song is called Jenny Clover, and it's almost like a nursery rhyme for kids. It's this very sweet song, and you think it's about like someone's daughter or their girlfriend, or some sweet little girl, but it's actually about a large black and white cow that was named Jennifer Clover. And when I went to Al's farm, maybe as a result of Pet Sounds and all of these other sort of things where they were playing off this idea of the animals, I went into the field, and I like saw the cow, and I had the guitar going, and then I was like playing and singing at the cow. And of course Al had been in town, and he drove back, and he just saw this guy that he met for the first time like in the middle of a field with a guitar singing at the cow, and he thought, oh my God, like, should I tell him I have an appointment and he's got to leave? Like he was like, who is this guy? Is he crazy? But he came out with the guitar in the field, and we started writing the song together. And it's a really fun song that is just playing off the cow jumped over the moon kind of things, and just very sweet. And his wife Marianne also worked on the lyrics with us, and of course now the cow, this was again a long time ago, and the cow is no longer with us. It's in the great pasture in the sky. But it's just, these are happy songs for people in a dark time, and you know, giving people a little bit of like, you know, sugar in their coffee, but
Mm-hmm.
musical sugar in their coffee, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for being willing to do this with us today. And as I said, we'll play the single and hopefully get some response out there for you. So.
Yeah, I love it. So I just want to let people know, because we're pretty accessible, that if anyone wants to, you know, purchase the
Mm-hmm.
CD, it is available at aljardine.com, ALJ like John, AR like Robert, DIN like New York, E.com, and it's there. And if anyone wants to reach me, I'm pretty findable. Like I don't get bothered because I'm not like, you know, a member of I'm not Justin Bieber, so no one really stalks me or anything. I need a stalker, so please reach out now. I'm at larrydvoskin.com, which is spelled Larry, D like David, V like Victor, OS like Sam, KIN. That's D like David, V like Victor, OS like Sam, KIN like Nancy.com. And sometimes we do Zooms. Like I've done a Zoom with Al Jardine, his first ever one. And fans just come on and ask him questions. What was it like, you know, being a colleague of the Beatles and having
Mm-hmm.
John Lennon like knock on your hotel door and just sort of like stalk you, you know,
Yeah.
like crazy things like that. Like that's a pretty cool thing when John Lennon is your stalker. Like
Mm-hmm.
you know you're doing something right, and we're accessible for whatever reason. Answer questions. You know, sometimes people send me music and just say, "Hey, you know, do you think this is good, or should I not quit my day job?" You know, whatever we can do to be of service and of help. That is this time of the pandemic has led us to open up the doors and say, you know, the line between fan and star or person like myself and someone who's learning has dissolved, you know, because we are all in this together, to use a cliche, and that's a real thing, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So I appreciate it, and please, this is a I think I've really enjoyed. You're catching me on a day with some good coffee, so I'd love to get a
Okay.
copy of this interview so I could share it with my socials, and maybe even on Al Jardine or the Beach Boys socials if there's a
Mm-hmm.
copy of it we can share.
Oh yeah, no, we'll get you a copy and everything, and I'll share your website and Al's website and everything on our Instagram. For all
So
of you out there, you can look up our Instagram and check out either the new single or a rebroadcast of this interview. It'll be at MC for Marietta College underscore student media spelled out. And I really do beg everyone listening. Yes, you can find the new singles on like every streaming platform. Buy the CD. More goes to the artists so they can make more music, so they can afford to do interviews with us and everything. And there's nothing like being able to actually hold the album you have. So, just personal note from me to all of you out there listening: just buy the album. Spend the extra $5 and go get the full physical album. Just do it. Get the CD. So thank you. And we'll play the interview. If you want to stay on for a second, I can get you all the information and everything.
awesome, man. That's awesome.
So
Thank you.
thank you, and everyone out there, Larry. So
Woo!
yeah, and we'll have the new single coming on right now. Everybody, thank you.
Thank you.